transmission of power is the second step along the electricity value chain, stashed between generation on the upstream and distribution on the much scrutinized downstream end of things, which, with the passage of time, has been negatively affected by policy somersaults on the part of government, disinterested investors, and a disgruntled paying public. But what's exactly wrong with the Transmission Company of Nigeria, the all-purpose vehicle on which that subsector is run, and why has there been a push for unbundling it? Joining us here in the Lagos studio to have a conversation is Sonny Iroche, former Executive Director of the Transmission Company of Nigeria and currently Executive Chairman of Strategic Alliance Promotion Company, based in Abuja and Lagos. Welcome to the program. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Tundu. Thank you very much for having me on the program.
Well, Mr. Iroche, welcome to the morning show. It's good to have you here. You were Executive Director with the Transmission Company of Nigeria, Finance and Accounts for 4 years. You were there during all that process of addressing issues in the power sector. But now people are talking about the unbundling of the Transmission Company of Nigeria. Well, what are your thoughts on this as someone who was once an insider in the TCN, which is the only government-owned structure along the electricity value chain?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Abati. Unbundling of any transmission power company is the international norm. TCN in 2013 ring-fenced 3 business units, namely the Transmission Service Provider, TSP, Market Operations, and System Operations. The TSP is basically responsible for building transformers, for building the power assets, the towers and the lines that you see that evacuate power from generation plants to the distribution companies that now pass on power to both commercial and residential end users. So from ring fencing, it was now spun off into 2 major companies. One, the transmission service provider that provides the assets, and ISO, independent systems operations, which combines market operations and system operations. The market operations is vested with the responsibility of collecting market funds from the end users and also to pass out invoices to all the people that are in the value chain, the companies that are in the value chain, and also to make payments down to the gas supplier and to NERC and all those that have to be paid through the tariff. While a system operator is like the mechanic of the system. They take care of they monitor the grid. They have a national control center in Osogbo that is computerized, that monitors the entire power value chain to make sure that everything goes right. And you know that power can never be stored. You can't store power. So from the point of generation, evacuation through the lines, down to step down in the transformers, power has to be used. So that's the whole essence of unbundling TCN. And in 2016, actually, 2 licenses were issued by NERC to TSP, the transmission service provider, and the independent service providers. So, and they have their management totally separate. They have their finances totally separate. What they really need to do now is to physically move away from each other and have their separate boards of directors. That has been the master plan for TCN.
Can you just take us to the rationale behind the lack of adherence to this master plan? Because even the Electric Power Sector Act of 2005 has sections in it, sections 8, 24, and 65, recognizing that the transmission should be unbundled, and it wasn't done. So what was the rationale? Why are we just finally approaching this stage now? And also the rationale for the concession to the Canadian Manitoba hydro company. Can you just take us, behind the scenes and tell us what informed all of that?
Okay, first, it's better late than never. At least we've started seriously addressing the issue of unbundling. Like I always say, there is no Nigerian way of flying a Boeing 747. There's only the proper way. The proper way to go is to unbundle TCN, which has, in sensu stricto, been done but hasn't been finalized. And you know that government is a continuum. This administration is now finally going towards it with the signing of the Siemens Presidential Power Initiative that was signed recently. And now there is a body called the FGN Power that is liaising between all agencies of government and Siemens. To answer your question directly, the delay of unbundling TCN is like the delay that you have in so many of the rules that were enunciated by the electric sector reforms agreement of 2005, the acts rather. There are market rules, there are grid code rules, there are meter rules that haven't been strictly adhered to. So for any reform, you normally have what we call post-privatization challenges. And the unbundling of TCN happens to be one of those post-privatization challenges that we face. Hopefully, with time and with all the players, all the stakeholders working together, hopefully the total unbundlement of TCN will be achieved.
Okay, I thought Tundu did ask about, the background story of Manitoba hydroelectric deal. I think that's the second part of the question, before I ask mine.
The Manitoba, thank you very much for reminding me, Rufai. The Manitoba management contract was one of those weird contracts that we shouldn't have gone into in the first place, because to procure any services by government, parastatals and agencies of government ought to go through the due process commission, which was done. And to be honest with you, Manitoba did not feature top. It was actually another foreign company. But be that as it may, Manitoba got the management contract, and I worked with them, and I was one of those who opposed them because Manitoba is a little local government in Canada that at best generates 5,000 megawatts and is an integrated, vertically integrated power system, which is they generate, they transmit, and they distribute, which was what the old NEPA, the old PHCN was. And when we ring-fenced and unbundled PHCN to 18 companies, that is 11 DISCOs, 6 GENCOs, and 1 TCN. You didn't need to bring a company that is in your old mold to come and be a management contractor. And Manitoba didn't do a good job. But that is for another day. It's a topic on its own that should be dealt with fully. Manitoba pulled Nigerian power sector back by 4 years that they were there. We were paying them in dollars, and they were really not staff of Manitoba, Canada. They hired some Asians from wherever they could get them, and to say the least, we didn't find them competent at all. And there was always clashes between the Manitoba executives and the Nigerian executives. You cannot have 8 substations in Nigeria and 43 work centers all over the federation, in Borno, in Umuahia, in Port Harcourt, all over the federation. And Manitoba did not for one day step out of Abuja to go and see what these substations and these work centers were doing. It was a very, very bad marriage, to say the least.
Okay. Thank you so much for that insight. I just want directly to you, this question to you, and just for a lot of people watching out there, why is it that TCN has not worked? Why is it that the transmission arm of power in this country is problematic? Has always been problematic, even since the good old days, because it's so, it's an indication of the sadness in this country that we call the NEPA days the good old days now, because compared to what we have now, sort of like the good old days. And secondly, when are we going to liberalize the grid system? When are we going to do that? Because having this single grid that everybody has to feed it up to the grid, and you have step-down stations, you have Papalanto and the likes, and Oloshogo, over a period of time, it has shown that it will not work for the size of Nigeria. And I repeat, it's 923,000 square kilometers of land we have in this country. When are we going to liberalize the grid system?
Thank you very much, Rufai, for that question. First, at TCN, like every participant in the market, they have their problems. TCN does not stand alone. First, when you are owing gas suppliers, they stop supplying gas to the GENCOs, to the generation companies, and you can only will what is generated. When I was in TCN, we were owing millions of dollars to the gas suppliers and the gas aggregators, and at times they said, we are not going to supply. Nigerians don't care, and they shouldn't really care who is dropping the ball in the value chain of power. They don't care whether it's the gas suppliers that haven't been paid, or it's TCN, or it's Embed, or it's all Nigerians want is power. TCN, like the GENCOs and the DISCOs, have their own inherent problems. For instance, the installed capacity of generation in Nigeria is over 14,000 megawatts. But as at the best ever generated and evacuated was recorded on the 1st of March 2021, this year, when we were able to generate and evacuate 5,801 megawatts of power. And this was at 9:30 p.m. on that day, on the 1st of March. So if TCN evacuates the 5,800 megawatts of power to a population of 200 million, to all the 11 GENCOs, of course there must be a form of rationing. So what some players will say, TCN has dropped the ball. What is responsible for poor generation? What is responsible for poor distribution? And what is responsible for some of these failures? Nigeria is one country where you witness high AT&C challenges, meaning aggregate technical, collection, and commercial losses, where there is a theft, serious theft of electricity. If you produce any product, whether it's soft drinks, whether it's alcohol beverages, whether it's food in a restaurant, and people come eat and don't pay, there is normally an atrophy in the finances of such a company. So you won't blame it on the restaurateur. It is our duty to prevent theft. Apart from theft, you have also vandalization of transmission assets, and this causes downtimes. When people attack your assets like the towers and cut off your strings, your network, there's a problem, yes.
Mr. Iroche, sorry to interrupt. We need to take a commercial break, okay, and then when we return, we'll come back to you. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our guest is still Sonny Iroche, former executive director of the Transmission Company of Nigeria and currently executive chairman of Strategic Alliance Promotion Company based in Abuja and Lagos. Mr. Iroche, thank you very much for staying with us. Before we went on break, you were talking about the challenges within the electricity value chain, and you were talking about theft and how that is a major problem. But don't also forget the point Rufai raised about the need to decentralize the grid.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ruben and Rufai. In every electricity industry, there usually is one strong national grid which gives rise to other regional national grids. I have also advocated, or often advocated, that since TCN has 8 regions, we can now empower and enhance the transmission capability of these 8 regions to form what we call a transmission loop. What we have in Nigeria is a radial system, which is synonymous with analog technology, whereas what you can call the digital technology in transmission is the looping system, and that was part of what TCN, I am aware, is currently developing. If we can get a good looping system and you address generation capacity, increase it, like what Siemens is trying to do. Siemens is trying to do a kind of enhanced transmission and distribution. You go to the regions, Lagos as a region can be independent. Enugu can be independent. Kanu, Bauchi regions are there. They can be enhanced and their transmission lines reconducted and upgraded. Yes, I agree that TCN, the national grid monopoly, could be broken, but it has to be gradual. What is essential is for people to be committed to do what they have to do and to make sure that the commercial end of the power sector is well addressed. In all privatizations that I have studied, India, Brazil, Mexico, Turkey, Argentina, they start with the commercial end privatization, the person that earns the money, the golden goose that lays the egg for the power sector. But in our own case, we did a massive privatization, which we thought at that time was quite successful until we started having post-privatization challenges. If we had focused first on the discos to make sure that their networks and their transformers are up to date and their funding is capable of allowing them pay back their invoices. When you borrow 80%, 70% debt, and you only put in 20% equity, of course you'll be under pressure from the banks to repay your loan. So to answer your question, yes, it is desirous that we get regional transmission.
Okay, very quickly, I mean, you've talked about the value chain within the electricity sector. Where is the weakest link? Is it transmission? Is it generation? Is it distribution? I know oftentimes discos get blamed and they say, no, it's not our fault. The fault lies elsewhere. And then you mentioned Siemens. What's your take on that federal government Siemens agreement, which turned out to be quite controversial in the light of Siemens antecedents in Nigeria?
On the weakest link, I would say clearly that all have sinned. Like the Bible says, all have sinned in the power sector. So you cannot single out one to say they are the weakest. The discos have their challenges and they have their own case. There are market rules. The government guaranteed discos certain conditions that they will fulfill, such as will provide you minimum of 5,000 megawatts of electricity at a certain time. Did government fulfill that one? No. Would you blame that on the discos? No. The discos invested money, borrowed money from financial institutions to buy these assets, to try to upgrade these assets. Then you do not give them a cost-reflective tariff that will take care of their expenses. When expenses are way ahead of revenue and income, it will not tie up. So structurally, from the foundation of that privatization, you don't blame the discos. And on TCN's side, TCN also is supposed to collect money through market operations, later to embed. TCN will evacuate power from GENCOs and expect to be paid for their services. But because of the paucity of funds at the disco side, TCN is unable to carry out its function. Then the gas supplier and the GENCOs will say, well, we have not been paid through the waterfall arrangement of payment of revenues that is collected at the DISCO. The DISCOs are those who collect the money for the market, for the electricity market. And if you send an invoice from MBET or market operations of 100%, as at the time I was in TCN, they were able to, most times at best, you get 20%. There was a time it even went as low as 11% of invoice. So if the commercial end of any business, be it banking, be it electricity, be it telecommunication, if the numbers do not add up, if the commercial end of it does not add up, then everybody is to blame. No one person will say, you will say it's the weakest link. But since Siemens has taken over the supervision of transmission and the DISCOs, they must have seen the reason why. The GENCOs will try and generate. There is hydro. There are 4 hydro companies. Once it rains, you have enough water to run the dams. But the challenges really are still with transmission and distribution due to no fault of theirs.
Thank you, sir. We only have a minute left. I just want your take on the solution. Some in the Nigerian Senate have said the solution is to reverse the privatization process. What is your take on that?
I've opposed that. You cannot reverse privatization, and you should not, because you are working and playing in the international circuit now. So you cannot go back. All you can do is go back to the agreement and see how you can review the agreement and make sure that the bottlenecks that confront the power sector are addressed. And the way forward, for me, one, get a cost-reflective tariff and let everybody be disciplined and abide by the rules that guide the electricity market. There is no way you can get it right without abiding by the market rules, the grid code, and the metering code.
Well, thank you very much for that, Mr. Iroche. Thank you very much indeed.